I knew my family loved my sister more than me. What I didn't know was how far they were willing to go to prove it. I mailed my wedding invitations 6 months in advance. The venue was booked, the guests confirmed, and everything was perfect. Then, 2 weeks before my wedding, my sister suddenly announced her engagement party, on the exact same day. At first, I thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. One by one, every member of my family chose her event over my wedding. My parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, even cousins. I stood at the altar staring at empty seats where my family should have been. But while cutting my wedding cake, my father sent me a text that changed everything. 10 minutes later, I replied, and his world fell apart. The day I got engaged was supposed to be the beginning of the happiest chapter of my life. When Ethan proposed, it wasn't at a fancy restaurant or during some elaborate surprise. We were sitting on a quiet dock overlooking a small lake outside the city. The sun was setting, the water was calm, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt peaceful. Then he got down on one knee. I cried before he even opened the ring box. 3 months later, we started planning our wedding. Neither of us wanted anything extravagant. We wanted something warm, elegant, and filled with people who genuinely cared about us. We booked a beautiful venue surrounded by gardens, reserved the date 6 months in advance, and immediately mailed invitations to everyone we loved, including my family. When my parents received their invitations, my mother called me the same evening. "Oh, sweetheart, it's beautiful," she said. "Your father and I wouldn't miss it for the world." For once, I believed her. Growing up, I wasn't usually the center of attention in our family. Most celebrations somehow revolved around my younger sister, Melissa. But this was different. This was my wedding. Surely nobody could take that away from me. Over the following months, RSVPs started arriving. Friends confirmed quickly. Ethan's family was thrilled. My cousins said they couldn't wait. Even relatives I hadn't seen in years promised they would attend. Every response made me more excited. I threw myself into planning. I spent evenings comparing flower arrangements, tasting cake samples, and searching for the perfect music playlist. Ethan teased me constantly because I kept changing the seating chart. "You've rearranged those tables 6 times, he laughed one night. 7. I corrected. He shook his head and pulled me into a hug. "Whatever happens, we're getting married. That's the important part." I smiled. He was right. Still, I wanted everything to be special. Especially because I hoped this wedding might finally bring my family together. For years, there had been little tensions, little disappointments, little moments that left scars nobody talked about. But weddings had a way of making people set aside old conflicts. At least that was what I told myself. As the months passed, everything seemed perfect. My mother asked about dress fittings. My father wanted details about the venue. Melissa even congratulated me several times and seemed genuinely supportive. Looking back now, I realized that should have made me suspicious. But at the time, I was happy. Blissfully happy. 6 weeks before the wedding, I stood in my living room surrounded by decorations and gift boxes while reviewing the final guest list. Almost everyone had confirmed. My family, my friends, my future husband's relatives, the people who mattered most. I remember staring at the list and feeling incredibly grateful. After years of feeling overlooked, I finally believed I was about to have my moment. A day centered on love. A day centered on family. A day where everyone would be together to celebrate something wonderful. I had absolutely no idea that within 2 weeks, everything would begin to fall apart. If you asked my family, they would probably deny having favorites. They would insist they loved Melissa and me equally. But families don't reveal favoritism through words. They reveal it through actions. Melissa was 4 years younger than me and had been the center of attention for as long as I could remember. When I graduated high school with honors, my parents took me to dinner at a local restaurant. When Melissa graduated, they rented a banquet hall. When I earned a scholarship to college, my father shook my hand and told me he was proud. When Melissa got accepted to a college 3 hours away, my parents threw a weekend celebration and invited dozens of relatives. There was always a difference, always an excuse, always a reason why Melissa deserved a little more. As a child, I noticed it. As a teenager, I resented it. As an adult, I tried to move past it. Whenever Ethan pointed it out, I defended them. That's just how my family is, I'd say. That doesn't make it okay, he would reply. Maybe he was right. Still, I wanted peace. I wanted a normal relationship with my parents and my sister. So when Melissa congratulated me after my engagement, I took it as a good sign. She called me regularly, asked questions about the venue, even helped me compare centerpiece designs. For the first time in years, we seemed to be getting along. I allowed myself to hope. Then, exactly 2 weeks after I mailed my wedding invitations, Melissa called a family meeting. The invitation arrived in our family group chat. Mom wrote that everyone should attend because Melissa had exciting news. I remember smiling when I read it. Maybe she was finally moving forward with her longtime boyfriend, Ryan. That Saturday, everyone gathered at my parents' house. The atmosphere felt strangely festive. There were balloons in the dining room. Extra food covered the kitchen counters. My mother looked more excited than I'd seen her in months. When Melissa walked into the room holding Ryan's hand, everyone immediately fell silent. Then Ryan got down on one knee. Even though it was obviously planned, relatives gasped dramatically. Melissa pretended to cry. Ryan slipped a ring onto her finger. The room exploded with applause. My mother started sobbing. My father hugged Ryan. Cousins rushed forward to take photos. For nearly 20 minutes, nobody spoke about anything except Melissa's engagement. I sat quietly on the couch, smiling politely. Inside, though, I felt something familiar. That old feeling. The feeling of becoming invisible. Eventually, Melissa approached me. Well, she asked, aren't you happy for me? Of course I am, I said honestly. And I was. Despite everything, I truly was. But then she said something that made my stomach tighten. We're planning an engagement party soon. That's great, I replied. Mom immediately clapped her hands. Oh, this is going to be wonderful. The conversation shifted entirely toward venues, decorations, guest lists, and catering. The same topics everyone had discussed about my wedding just days earlier. Except now nobody was talking about my wedding anymore. Every question focused on Melissa. Every idea revolved around Melissa. Every smile belonged to Melissa. I tried to ignore the uncomfortable feeling growing in my chest. After all, she had just gotten engaged. She deserved some attention. What I didn't know was that the engagement itself wasn't the real problem. The real problem was the date Melissa had already chosen. 3 days after Melissa's engagement, my mother called me while I was leaving work. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. Honey, Melissa finalized the date for her engagement party. That was fast, I said. I know. Isn't it exciting? I smiled politely even though she couldn't see me. So, when is it? There was a brief pause. Then she told me. I nearly dropped my phone. The engagement party was scheduled for the exact same day as my wedding. Not the weekend before. Not the weekend after. The exact same Saturday. The exact same date that had been printed on my invitations for months. At first, I honestly thought it had to be a mistake. Wait, I said. The same day as my wedding? Well, yes. My mother's tone immediately became defensive. That's the only day the venue had available. I pulled into a parking lot and sat there staring through the windshield. Mom, she knew my wedding date. Of course she did. And she still picked that day? It just worked out that way. I ended the call feeling unsettled. The explanation didn't make sense. Melissa had gotten engaged less than a week earlier. There were 52 weekends in the year. Yet somehow the only possible day for her engagement party happened to be my wedding day. That evening I called her directly. She answered on the second ring. Hey, future bride, she said. I forced a laugh. Melissa, can we talk about your engagement party date? Instant silence. Then came a sigh. I knew this was coming. Because it's my wedding day. It's not a big deal. I sat upright. Not a big deal? It's just an engagement party. Then why not move it? Another pause. The answer came quickly. No. Just one word. No explanation. No compromise. No apology. Simply no. Melissa, people are going to have to choose. They can attend whichever event they want. The way she said it made my stomach twist. There was something almost challenging in her voice, as if she already knew what would happen, as if she was daring me to object. I planned this wedding 6 months ago, and I just got engaged. That doesn't answer the question. She laughed softly, a strange laugh, cold, dismissive. You worry too much. Then she changed the subject. I hung up a few minutes later feeling worse than before. The next evening, my parents invited Ethan and me over for dinner. Halfway through the meal, I brought up the date issue. My father immediately frowned. You need to stop making this a competition. A competition? I repeated. I'm getting married, and Melissa is celebrating her engagement. On my wedding day. He shrugged. People can make their own decisions. I looked at my mother. She avoided eye contact. For the first time, a terrible thought crossed my mind. What if this wasn't an accident? What if everyone knew exactly what they were doing? Driving home, Ethan listened quietly as I explained the conversation. When I finished, he gripped the steering wheel and stared at the road ahead. I don't like this. Neither do I. You think she planned it? I wanted to say no. I wanted to defend my family like I always did. But for the first time I couldn't, because deep down I already knew the truth. Melissa hadn't accidentally chosen my wedding day. She had chosen it on purpose. The only question left was how many people would choose her over me. For a few days, nothing happened. I convinced myself that maybe I was overthinking everything. Sure, Melissa's engagement party was scheduled on my wedding day, but surely my family wouldn't abandon my wedding because of it. Surely they wouldn't force people to choose. And if they did, surely most people would honor commitments they had already made months ago. I wanted to believe that. Then the first cancellation arrived. It came from my Aunt Denise. She sent a short text apologizing and saying something had come up unexpectedly. No explanation. No details. Just a cancellation. I was disappointed but not alarmed. Things happened. People changed plans. One guest dropping out wasn't unusual. 2 days later, my Uncle Mark canceled. The next morning, one of my cousins withdrew her RSVP. By the end of the week, 4 more relatives had backed out. Each message sounded strangely similar. Family obligation. Unexpected conflict. Need to be elsewhere. Can't make it anymore. The wording was different, but the pattern felt identical. Like they had all rehearsed the same excuse. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the growing list of cancellations. Ethan pulled out a chair beside me. How many now?
8. His jaw tightened.
Have any of them given a real reason? I shook my head.
No.
Neither of us said what we were both thinking. The reason was obvious. Melissa's engagement party. A few days later, my grandmother called. For a moment, I felt relieved. Grandma had always been kind to me. I assumed she was calling to reassure me. Instead, her voice sounded hesitant. Honey, I wanted to tell you personally. My stomach dropped immediately. What happened? There was a long pause. Your grandfather and I won't be able to attend the wedding. The words hit harder than I expected. What? I hope you understand. No, I said quietly. I don't. Another uncomfortable silence followed. Then she sighed. Your mother thinks it's important for us to support Melissa. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. Support Melissa. As if attending my wedding somehow meant refusing to support her. As if the two events couldn't have existed on separate days. After we ended the call, I sat motionless for nearly 10 minutes. Ethan found me staring at the wall. What happened? I told him. His face darkened. Your grandparents too? I nodded. That was when I finally broke. Not completely. Just enough for tears to come. Enough for the reality to sink in. People were choosing. And they weren't choosing me. The next week made everything worse. My parents officially informed me they would attend Melissa's engagement party. My father claimed he needed to help organize the event. My mother said Melissa needed her support. Neither seemed concerned about missing their daughter's wedding. Neither appeared guilty. Neither apologized. Once my parents made their decision, the rest of the family followed quickly. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. One by one, they disappeared from my guest list. Every cancellation felt like another door closing. Every text message felt like another reminder of where I stood in the family hierarchy. Melissa first, everyone else second, including me. 2 weeks before the wedding, I reviewed the seating chart again. An entire section reserved for my family sat nearly empty. Rows of vacant seats stared back at me from the diagram. I swallowed hard and tried to stay strong. But deep down, a painful question kept repeating itself. If my own family wouldn't show up for my wedding, what exactly had I ever meant to them? I spent the next several days trying to focus on the wedding. There were still decorations to finalize, vendors to confirm, last-minute details that couldn't be ignored. Whenever thoughts about my family crept into my mind, I pushed them away. I told myself that dwelling on it wouldn't change anything. People had made their choices. All I could do was move forward. Then, 9 days before the wedding, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my cousin Rachel. We weren't especially close, but we'd always gotten along. When I answered, her voice sounded nervous. "Are you alone?" The question immediately caught my attention.
Yes.
"Why?" Rachel hesitated. "I need to tell you something." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" Another pause. Then she lowered her voice. "The engagement party isn't a coincidence." Every muscle in my body went still. I knew it. "No," Rachel said quietly. "You don't understand." I sat down at the kitchen table. "What don't I understand?" She exhaled heavily. "Melissa planned this." I closed my eyes. Part of me wasn't surprised. But hearing someone else confirm it felt different. It made everything real. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen the family group chat." My eyes opened instantly. What family group chat? The silence that followed told me everything. There was another group chat. One I wasn't part of. One that apparently included everyone else. Rachel continued carefully. "Melissa created it right after she got engaged." A cold feeling spread through my chest. What was she saying? Rachel sounded uncomfortable. At first, she kept calling her engagement party a once-in-a-lifetime celebration. I laughed bitterly. "So is a wedding." "I know." Then her voice became even quieter. After that, she started pressuring people. My grip tightened around the phone.
How?
Rachel hesitated. Then she answered. "She told everyone she'd be heartbroken if they chose your wedding." I stared at the wall, speechless. Rachel continued. She kept saying family should support her special moment. My wedding wasn't a special moment. I didn't say that.
No.
Melissa did. The line went silent. Finally, Rachel said, "There's more." Those 3 words hit harder than anything else, because I already knew I wasn't going to like what came next. "What else?" "Your parents were helping." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "What?" Rachel sounded miserable. "Your mom kept encouraging people to attend Melissa's party." My chest tightened. "And Dad?" He agreed with her. The room suddenly felt smaller, warmer, harder to breathe in. I had suspected favoritism. I had suspected manipulation. But I never imagined my parents were actively participating. Rachel's voice softened. "I'm sorry." I swallowed hard. "Do you have proof?" "Yes." A few seconds later, my phone vibrated repeatedly. Screenshots, one after another. I opened them, and everything changed. There was Melissa telling relatives that her engagement deserved priority. There was my mother agreeing. There was my father reminding everyone how important family loyalty was. There were cousins discussing which event they would attend. My event. Her event. As if they were comparing restaurant options. As if my wedding wasn't one of the most important days of my life. As if I wasn't family too. I stared at the messages for nearly an hour. Every screenshot confirmed the same painful truth. This wasn't bad luck. It wasn't poor scheduling. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate, organized,
Planned.
and the people responsible were the people I had trusted most. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. But strangely, I wasn't crying anymore. I was done hoping they would choose me. Now I needed to decide what I was going to do next. The morning of my wedding arrived with clear skies and warm sunlight. For a few peaceful seconds after waking up, I forgot everything. I forgot the canceled RSVPs. I forgot the screenshots. I forgot the family group chat. I forgot that almost everyone related to me had chosen my sister's engagement party over my wedding. Then reality returned. I stared at the ceiling and took a slow breath. Today was my wedding day.
Nothing was going to change that.
A few minutes later, Ethan knocked gently on the hotel suite door connecting our rooms. "You okay?" he asked. I smiled. "Ask me again in 12 hours. He laughed softly. "Deal." His calm confidence helped. It always did. While the bridal party arrived and preparations began, I focused on the small moments. The makeup artist humming quietly, the scent of fresh flowers filling the room, the sound of my friends laughing as they helped each other get ready. Unlike my family, they had shown up, every single one of them. That mattered more than they probably realized. Around noon, my maid of honor handed me a cup of coffee. Nervous. A little. About getting married? I shook my head.
No.
She understood immediately. Without saying a word, she squeezed my hand. That simple gesture nearly made me cry. Not because I was sad, because someone actually saw what I was carrying. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 o'clock. At 2:45, I stood behind the venue doors waiting for the music to begin. Guests filled the garden seating area outside. Through a small opening in the curtain, I looked toward the rows of chairs. And there they were, the empty seats. An entire section reserved for my family, almost completely vacant. No parents, no grandparents, no aunts, no uncles, no cousins. Just empty chairs sitting beneath the afternoon sun. For a moment, my chest tightened. I had prepared myself for this. I had known it was coming, but seeing it with my own eyes was different. The reality hurt more than the expectation. I looked away before the tears could fall. Then the wedding coordinator smiled gently. "It's time." The music started. The doors opened. And everything changed. As I stepped forward, I saw Ethan waiting at the altar. The second our eyes met, the pain lost some of its power. His expression said everything. "You're not alone." I walked down the aisle slowly. Friends smiled. Guests stood. People who genuinely cared about us watched with happiness in their eyes. The empty chairs were still there. But suddenly, they weren't the only thing I could see. The ceremony itself felt almost dreamlike. Every vow carried meaning. Every promise felt real. Every word reminded me why I was there. Not for my family. Not for approval. Not for validation. For love. For partnership. For a future with the man standing beside me. When the officiant finally pronounced us husband and wife, applause erupted throughout the garden. The sound was louder than I expected. Warmer. More sincere. And for the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely happy. After the ceremony, guests moved inside for the reception. Music filled the ballroom. Conversations echoed across the room. Laughter replaced tension. Little by little, I stopped thinking about who wasn't there. Instead, I focused on who was. People who chose us. People who wanted to celebrate with us. People who showed up. As the evening continued, I found myself smiling more naturally. Maybe my family had abandoned my wedding. Maybe they were all gathered at Melissa's engagement party instead. But they weren't going to ruin this day. Not anymore. I truly believed the worst part was finally over. Then, during the cake-cutting ceremony, my phone vibrated in my purse. And everything changed again. By the time the reception reached the cake-cutting ceremony, I felt lighter than I had all day. The hardest part was behind me. The vows had been exchanged. The photographs were finished. The speeches had gone surprisingly well. Even the empty family section no longer dominated my thoughts. The people who truly cared about Ethan and me had filled the room with enough warmth to make up for the missing seats. At least, that was what I kept telling myself. The ballroom glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Soft music drifted through the air. Guests gathered around as Ethan and I stood beside our wedding cake. 3 elegant tiers covered in white frosting and fresh flowers. Months of planning had led to this moment. Someone in the crowd shouted for us to feed each other a slice. Laughter followed. I looked at Ethan and smiled. For the first time all day, the smile felt completely genuine. We cut the cake together while cameras flashed around us. Applause echoed throughout the room. People cheered. Someone started chanting our names. The atmosphere felt joyful. Normal. Exactly how a wedding reception should feel. Then my phone vibrated. At first, I ignored it. The phone was inside my purse beneath the gift table. Probably another congratulatory message. Maybe a friend posting photos. Nothing urgent. A few seconds later, it vibrated again. And again. 3 notifications within less than a minute. Something about that felt strange. Go check it, Ethan said quietly. You sure? He nodded. We'll survive 30 seconds without cake. A few nearby guests laughed. I smiled and walked toward the table. When I opened my purse, I immediately saw the sender. Dad. My heart skipped. He hadn't contacted me all day. Not before the ceremony. Not after the ceremony. Not during the reception. Nothing. Not even a simple congratulations. Yet suddenly he was texting. I opened the message. The words were short. Only 4 words. What did you do? I stared at the screen. Confused. What did you do? That was it. No greeting. No explanation. No context. Just a question. My stomach tightened. A second message arrived almost instantly. Call me.
Now.
I looked up from the phone. Across the ballroom, guests were laughing and celebrating. Nobody had any idea what was happening. Neither did I. A third message appeared. This time from my mother. Please answer your father. The feeling in my chest grew heavier. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I stepped into a quiet hallway outside the reception room and called my father. He answered before the first ring finished. What did you send? He demanded. No hello. No congratulations. No acknowledgement that his daughter had gotten married less than 2 hours earlier. Just anger. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. I honestly don't. There was shouting in the background. Voices. Multiple voices. The noise sounded chaotic. Almost frantic. Then I heard Melissa. Even through the phone, I recognized her voice instantly. She sounded furious. My father lowered his voice. Why would you do this today? The question made even less sense than the text. Do what today? Another burst of shouting erupted somewhere near him. Then the line went silent for several seconds. When he spoke again, his voice sounded completely different. Not angry. Shaken. Almost frightened. Your message, he said quietly. The one everyone just read. I frowned. What message? Silence. Long silence. Then my father said something that made my blood run cold. Don't play games with me, Emily. Another notification appeared on my phone. A family group message. Dozens of new replies. Dozens. And suddenly, for the first time all day, I realized something enormous had happened at Melissa's engagement party. I stood alone in the hallway outside the reception ballroom, staring at my phone. The family group chat was exploding. Message after message appeared so quickly that I could barely follow the conversation. Some relatives sounded angry. Others sounded shocked. A few seemed completely confused. The only thing they all had in common was that they were talking about me, or more specifically, about a message they believed I had sent. My father called again. I declined it. Then my mother called. I declined that too. For nearly 30 seconds, I simply watched the notifications pile up. Finally, I opened the group chat. The newest message came from Melissa. How could you do this on my engagement day? A cousin replied immediately. She's not the one who wrote it. Another relative disagreed. Then, who sent it? The argument continued. I scrolled upward, and suddenly, I understood. Earlier that morning, before the ceremony, I had scheduled a text. Not to my family. To my father. A text I had written 3 nights earlier after reading Rachel's screenshots. A text I wasn't even sure he would read. Apparently he had. And apparently he had shared it. I opened my sent messages and reread the words.
Dad.
I hope Melissa's engagement party is everything you wanted it to be. Since you chose it over your daughter's wedding, I thought today was the appropriate time to tell you something Grandma asked me to keep private. 3 months before she passed away, she gave me a letter and specific instructions. She told me not to share them until the day my family finally showed me where I stood. If you're reading this, I guess that day arrived. The letter is attached. My heart pounded. Attached beneath the message was a photograph. A photograph of my grandmother's handwritten letter. The same letter I had protected for nearly 2 years. The same letter she had trusted only me to keep. A letter none of my relatives knew existed. Suddenly, another notification appeared. This one came directly from my father. What else did she leave you? I stared at the question. Then I smiled for the first time since leaving the ballroom. Now, everything made sense. The letter had done exactly what Grandma expected it would do. I thought back to the afternoon she had given it to me. She had been sitting in her favorite chair beside the living room window. Her health was already declining. Her hands had trembled slightly as she held the envelope. "Promise me something," she had said. I promised. "Don't open this with them present."
Why?
Because some people only reveal their true character when they believe they've won. At the time, I hadn't fully understood. Now I did.
Perfectly.
My phone vibrated again. This time it was Rachel. You should see their faces right now. Another message followed. Nobody is celebrating anymore. The engagement party is basically over. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. For months, my family had ignored my feelings. For weeks, they had treated my wedding like an inconvenience. For days, they had gathered behind my back and planned how to abandon me. Yet all it took was one letter from Grandma to shatter the entire evening. Not because the letter was cruel. Not because it contained threats. Not because it demanded revenge.
No.
The letter contained something much more powerful. The truth. And judging by the panic spreading through the family chat, the truth was something nobody at Melissa's engagement party wanted to face. While my family argued inside Melissa's engagement party, I stood outside my wedding reception and remembered the day Grandma had trusted me with her secret. It happened almost 2 years earlier. She had asked me to visit her house alone. At the time, nobody thought much of it. Grandma and I had always been close. I visited regularly, helped with groceries, drove her to appointments, spent afternoons listening to stories everyone else was too busy to hear. When I arrived that day, she seemed unusually serious. After making tea, she led me into her study and closed the door. Then she opened a small wooden box. Inside sat several documents and a sealed envelope. "I need you to keep these safe," she said. I frowned. "Why me?" Her answer came immediately. "Because you're the only one I trust." The word surprised me. Grandma wasn't normally dramatic. She was practical.
Direct.
Careful with every sentence. That was why I knew this mattered. She handed me the envelope. On the front, written in neat handwriting, were 6 words. "Open only when the time comes." "What does that mean?" I asked. Grandma smiled sadly. "It means one day you'll understand." I wanted more answers. Instead, she reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. Then she said something I never forgot. "Families don't break apart in a single day." I listened quietly. They break apart through small choices, repeated over and over. At the time, I assumed she was talking generally. Now I realized she had been speaking about us, about my parents, about Melissa, about years of favoritism everyone pretended not to notice. Grandma had noticed. Every birthday where my accomplishments were ignored. Every holiday where Melissa became the center of attention. Every family gathering where expectations applied differently depending on which daughter stood in the room. She had seen all of it. And unlike everyone else, she never pretended it was fair. Before I left that afternoon, she gave me one final instruction. If your family ever shows you exactly where you stand, open the envelope. And then you'll know what to do. After she passed away several months later, I honored her request. I never discussed the envelope. Never mentioned the documents. Never told anyone they existed. Not even Ethan. The secret remained locked away. Until the family chose Melissa's engagement party over my wedding. The morning of my wedding, I finally opened the envelope. Inside was Grandma's handwritten letter. But that wasn't all. There were legal documents as well. Documents connected to a private investment account that nobody in the family knew about. An account Grandma had built quietly over decades. The amount wasn't enormous compared to some fortunes. but it was substantial enough to matter. More importantly, the documents contained conditions. Specific conditions. Grandma had anticipated exactly what might happen after her death, and she had structured everything accordingly. The letter explained why. She believed inheritance should reward character, not entitlement. Kindness, not favoritism. Loyalty, not manipulation. The final pages made her intentions unmistakably clear. And when my father read those pages at Melissa's engagement party, he finally understood something devastating. The inheritance everyone assumed would eventually benefit the family had never been intended for them. Grandma had already made her decision. Years earlier. Quietly. Legally. Permanently. And the moment my father opened my wedding day text, he discovered that the person Grandma ultimately chose to trust wasn't Melissa. It wasn't my parents. It was me. By the time I returned to the reception ballroom, my phone had become impossible to ignore. Notifications arrived every few seconds. Texts.
Calls.
Messages from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in weeks. People who had skipped my wedding. People who suddenly seemed desperate to reach me. Ethan noticed immediately. What happened? I showed him the screen. His eyebrows rose. That's a lot of missed calls. You have no idea. We returned to our table while guests continued celebrating around us. For them, the evening was still joyful. For my family, however, something very different was happening. Rachel kept sending updates. Each message revealed a little more chaos. First came a photo. Melissa stood beside the engagement cake. Her smile was gone. Several relatives surrounded her. Nobody looked happy. A minute later, another message arrived. Your dad just finished reading the whole letter. Then another. People are arguing now. I stared at the screen. Part of me felt guilty for enjoying the updates. Most of me didn't. For years, every family gathering followed the same pattern. Melissa received attention. Everyone else adjusted. Nobody questioned it. Nobody challenged it. And now, for the first time, that pattern was breaking apart. Rachel called. I stepped away from the music so I could hear her. You wouldn't believe this place. What happened? She laughed nervously. Everything exploded. I leaned against a wall. Tell me. After your father read the letter, people started asking questions. What kind of questions? The kind nobody wanted to answer. I already knew where this was going. The letter hadn't accused anyone. It hadn't insulted anyone. It had simply documented years of favoritism. Specific examples. Specific dates. Specific choices. All written by Grandma herself. The truth was difficult to argue with when it came from someone everyone respected. Rachel continued. Some relatives started defending you. That surprised me. Really?
Yes.
A lot of people admitted they always noticed the favoritism. I closed my eyes. For years I had wondered if I was imagining it. Apparently, I wasn't. Then what happened? Melissa lost her temper. That part didn't surprise me at all. Rachel lowered her voice. She accused everyone of turning against her. I could picture it perfectly. The crossed arms. The angry expression. The refusal to accept responsibility. Melissa had always struggled when attention moved away from her. And now, every conversation revolved around Grandma's letter instead of her engagement. The timing couldn't have been worse. Or better. Another message arrived while Rachel was speaking. This one included a photo of my parents. My father sat at a table staring at the documents. My mother looked pale. Neither resembled people attending a celebration. They looked like people confronting something they had spent years avoiding. The party basically stopped, Rachel said. What do you mean? Nobody's dancing. Nobody's eating. People are just standing around talking. About the letter. About the inheritance. About years of family behavior. About consequences. The very things my family had spent years pretending didn't exist. A loud cheer erupted from inside my reception. Someone had started another toast. I glanced toward the ballroom doors and smiled. My wedding was still moving forward.
Love.
Laughter. Happiness. Meanwhile, across town, Melissa's engagement party had transformed into something entirely different. Not a celebration. Not a family gathering. A reckoning. And judging by the messages still flooding my phone, the worst part hadn't happened yet. Because my father had only just reached the final pages of Grandma's documents. The next update arrived 20 minutes later. I was sitting beside Ethan, listening to one of his college friends tell a hilarious story, when my phone lit up again. This time, the message came directly from my father. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Then curiosity won. I opened the text. The message contained only one sentence. Why didn't she tell us? I stared at the screen. Not anger. Not accusations. Not demands. Just confusion. For the first time all evening, my father sounded less like a man defending his choices and more like a man confronting them. Before I could respond, Rachel sent another update. Your dad just finished reading everything. Everything. Not only Grandma's letter, the supporting documents as well. The timeline, the written notes, the legal instructions attached to the investment account. Every page, every detail, every observation Grandma had recorded during the final years of her life. I remembered reading them myself that morning. Some sections had been difficult. Others had been heartbreaking. Grandma had documented moments I barely remembered. The birthday party where Melissa received gifts during my celebration because she felt left out. The family vacation where my achievement was ignored because Melissa had a bad day. The graduation dinner that somehow became centered on her future plans instead of my accomplishment. Individually, each event seemed small. Together, they painted a picture impossible to dismiss. A pattern, a lifetime of choices. And now my father had finally seen them all in one place. Rachel called again. I stepped into the hallway. What happened now? Her voice sounded almost stunned. Your dad asked everyone to sit down. I frowned.
Why?
Because he wanted to read part of the letter out loud. That surprised me.
Deeply.
My father was not a man who enjoyed uncomfortable conversations. If anything, he spent years avoiding them. Yet apparently something inside Grandma's words had affected him. Rachel continued. He read the section about accountability. I knew exactly which section she meant. Grandma had written, "Love is not proven by what we say. It is proven by what we repeatedly choose." Simple words, but impossible to argue with. What did everyone do? I asked. Nobody said anything. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Rachel added quietly, "Your mom started crying." I closed my eyes. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt sad. Not because my parents were upset, because none of this had needed to happen. For years, all they had to do was acknowledge the truth. Instead, they ignored it, defended it,
Normalized it.
and eventually built their entire family dynamic around it. Now they were facing the consequences. Not legal consequences. Not financial consequences. Something harder. The realization that someone they loved had seen everything and written it down. My phone vibrated again. Another text from my father. This one was longer. Emily, I don't know what to say. Grandma was right about things I never wanted to admit. Reading her words felt like looking into a mirror I spent years avoiding. I swallowed hard. A second message followed. I think I failed you. The words hit me harder than I expected, because they were the first honest thing my father had said in years. Not a defense. Not an excuse. Not a justification. An admission. Across town, the engagement party continued unraveling. Relatives argued. Conversations grew uncomfortable. Questions demanded answers. And at the center of it all sat my father, holding Grandma's documents, finally understanding what she had understood long ago. Favoritism wasn't a single mistake. It was thousands of choices. And tonight, every one of those choices had finally come due. The morning after my wedding, I woke up beside Ethan feeling something I hadn't experienced in weeks.
Peace.
Not complete peace. There was still hurt. Still disappointment. Still years of family history that couldn't be erased overnight. But for the first time, I no longer felt confused. Everything was finally out in the open. Then my phone started ringing. At 7:30 in the morning. I glanced at the screen.
Mom.
I let it ring. A minute later, she called again. Then again. Then Dad. Then Melissa. By 8 o'clock, I had 23 missed calls. Ethan looked over from his side of the bed. I'm guessing they're not calling to congratulate us. I laughed softly.
No.
I don't think they are. The first voicemail came from my mother. Her voice sounded exhausted. Emily, please call us. We need to talk. The second was from my father. Your mother and I would like to explain some things. Explain. That word irritated me immediately. For years, they had opportunities to explain. Now that Grandma's letter had exposed everything, suddenly they wanted a conversation. Around noon, I finally listened to Melissa's message. The second I heard her voice, I knew nothing had changed. This whole thing is completely unfair. I rolled my eyes. Of course. Not an apology. Not accountability. Unfair. Melissa continued speaking. You made everyone turn against me. I almost laughed. Grandma's letter had done no such thing. It simply revealed the truth.
The truth was what people were reacting to.
A few minutes later, another text arrived from one of my cousins. Family meeting at Mom and Dad's tonight. They want you there. I stared at the message, then set the phone down. 3 months earlier, they couldn't make time for my wedding. Now they wanted immediate attention. The irony wasn't lost on me. By evening, the messages became more desperate. Several relatives claimed there had been misunderstandings. Others insisted nobody intended to hurt me. One aunt even wrote that the family needed healing. Healing. Another interesting word. People always wanted healing after consequences appeared. Rarely before. Around 7 o'clock, my father sent a long text. Emily, I know we can't change what happened. I know we hurt you. But please understand that none of us realized how bad things had become until we read Grandma's letter. I read it twice. Then a third time. Finally, I responded. You didn't realize because you never wanted to. A few minutes passed. Then his reply arrived. You're probably right. For several seconds, I simply stared at the screen. No argument. No defense. Just honesty. That was new. Meanwhile, Melissa continued sending messages.
Some angry.
Some emotional. Some claiming Grandma had misunderstood the family dynamic. Those messages only confirmed what I already knew. Everyone else was finally beginning to reflect. Melissa wasn't. Later that night, while sitting on the balcony with Ethan, I watched the sun disappear beyond the horizon. My phone remained silent for the first time all day. The family meeting had ended. The damage control campaign was over. And despite all the apologies, explanations, and excuses, one truth remained unchanged. Nobody had skipped my wedding by accident. They had made a choice. Now they simply wished they hadn't been forced to see it so clearly. The difference was that I finally saw it clearly too. And once the truth becomes impossible to ignore, pretending stops being an option. A week after the wedding, my parents asked if they could meet me in person. Not at their house. Not at a family gathering. Just the three of us. Neutral territory. A small cafe halfway between our homes. I almost declined. Part of me felt there was nothing left to discuss. The truth was already out. The damage had already been done. But another part of me wanted closure. So I agreed. Ethan offered to come with me. I appreciated the gesture, but I shook my head. I need to do this myself. He kissed my forehead before I left. Then remind yourself of something.
What?
You don't owe anyone forgiveness. Those words stayed with me during the entire drive. When I arrived, my parents were already waiting. Neither looked particularly happy. My father seemed older somehow. My mother looked tired. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Then I remembered the empty seats at my wedding. The feeling passed. We exchanged awkward greetings before sitting down. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Thank you for coming. I nodded. My mother stared into her coffee. Then she quietly said, We're sorry. The words hung in the air. Simple.
Direct.
Long overdue. I waited. Eventually, my father continued. We should have been at your wedding. Yes, I said. No anger. No sarcasm. Just the truth. My mother wiped at her eyes. We thought Melissa needed us. I looked at her calmly. And I didn't. Neither parent answered. Because there wasn't an answer. Not one that made sense. Not one that justified their choice. My father exhaled slowly. Grandma saw things more clearly than we did.
No, I said.
Both looked surprised. She saw exactly what everyone else saw. The table fell silent. I continued. The difference is that she was willing to admit it. My parents lowered their eyes. For years, I had imagined this conversation. In every version, I was angry. In every version, I confronted them. Demanded explanations. Demanded accountability. But sitting there now, I felt strangely calm. Because I wasn't fighting for their approval anymore. I didn't need it. I spent years trying to earn something that should have been given freely, I said. My mother's face tightened. Emily.
No.
Let me finish. She nodded. I took a breath. I kept telling myself things would change. That eventually you'd notice. Eventually, you'd treat me the same way you treated Melissa. Neither interrupted. I was wrong. The words weren't bitter. Just honest. People show you who they are through their choices. Grandma had taught me that. Now I finally understood it. My father looked down at the table. We failed you. Yes. Again, no anger. Just truth. The hardest truth of all. After a while, my mother whispered, "Can we fix this?" I thought carefully before answering. Then I shook my head. You can't fix the past. Tears filled her eyes. But you can be better in the future. Neither parent spoke. I stood and picked up my purse. For years, I would have stayed. Comforted them. Made things easier. Not anymore. As I walked toward the door, I felt lighter than I had in a very long time. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking my family to choose me. I was choosing myself. The months that followed were surprisingly quiet. Not because everything had been resolved. Far from it. The family was still dealing with the fallout from Grandma's letter and the revelations that came with it. But for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of trying to fix everyone else's problems. I focused on my marriage, on Ethan, on building the life we had promised each other on our wedding day. And honestly, that felt better than any revenge ever could. The legal matters surrounding Grandma's estate were finalized 3 months after the wedding. Everything happened exactly as she intended. The investment account was distributed according to the instructions she had carefully documented years earlier. There were no loopholes. No successful challenges. No dramatic courtroom battles. Just the execution of her wishes. Some relatives accepted the outcome gracefully. Others didn't. A few complained. A few blamed me. A few insisted Grandma had been manipulated. Those accusations never lasted long. The documents were too clear. The instructions too detailed. The evidence too strong. Grandma had known exactly what she was doing. And everyone eventually realized it. Melissa took the situation the hardest. For weeks, she continued arguing with relatives. She insisted the family had treated both of us fairly. She claimed people were exaggerating. She even tried convincing herself that Grandma had misunderstood her. But fewer and fewer people were willing to agree. Something had changed after the engagement party. People were finally being honest. Not all at once. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to make denial difficult. My parents changed too. Slowly. Awkwardly. Imperfectly. For the first time in my life, they stopped asking me to accommodate Melissa's feelings. Stopped expecting me to quietly accept whatever happened. Stopped pretending obvious things weren't happening. It didn't erase the past. Nothing could. But it was a start. One afternoon, several months after the wedding, my father called. We talked for nearly an hour. Not about inheritance. Not about Grandma. Not about Melissa. Just life. Normal conversation. Simple conversation. The kind we should have been having years ago. When the call ended, I realized something important. Forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting. I wasn't pretending the hurt never happened. I wasn't rewriting history. I was simply refusing to let old wounds control every future decision. That distinction mattered. A lot. The greatest lesson Grandma left behind wasn't hidden in legal documents or investment accounts. It was hidden in her actions. She never sought revenge. She never tried to punish anyone. She simply allowed truth to exist. And once the truth existed, consequences followed naturally. No shouting required. No revenge required. No bitterness required. Just honesty. Looking back, I don't think Grandma wanted anyone to suffer. I think she wanted people to see themselves clearly. Some did. Some didn't. That part was never within my control. What was within my control was deciding how I would move forward.
And I chose peace.
Not because my family deserved it, not because the past disappeared, but because after carrying disappointment for so many years, peace felt like the greatest gift I could give myself. 1 year later, I found myself sitting on the back patio of our house on a warm Saturday morning. A cup of coffee rested beside me. Ethan was working in the garden. The world felt peaceful. Simple. The kind of peace I used to think came from having a perfect family. Now I knew better. Peace came from accepting reality. Not fighting it. Not denying it. Not waiting for people to become someone they had repeatedly shown they weren't. Over the previous year, a lot had changed. My relationship with my parents remained cautious, but healthier than it had ever been. Not perfect. Probably never perfect. But honest. For the first time, difficult conversations actually happened instead of being ignored. For the first time, accountability existed. That mattered. Melissa, on the other hand, never fully accepted what happened. She remained convinced that Grandma's letter had somehow caused the family's problems, as though years of choices hadn't existed before a single envelope was opened. We spoke occasionally, mostly during holidays, mostly politely. But the closeness she wanted simply wasn't there anymore. Trust, once broken enough times, doesn't magically return. The rest of the family settled into a new normal. Some relationships grew stronger. Others faded naturally. Surprisingly, I no longer spent much time worrying about any of it, because my attention was focused elsewhere. On my marriage, on my future, on the life Ethan and I were building together. That Saturday morning, my phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Wedding anniversary. I smiled immediately. 1 year. An entire year had passed since the day my family chose Melissa's engagement party over my wedding. A day that once felt devastating. A day that once felt like proof that I wasn't important. Now, strangely, I saw it differently. If my family had attended the wedding, none of the hidden truths would have surfaced. Grandma's letter would have remained locked away. The favoritism would have continued. The excuses would have continued. The disappointment would have continued. Instead, everything finally came into the light. Painful as it was, the truth set me free. Ethan walked onto the patio and sat beside me. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I looked out across the yard. The sunlight, the flowers, the life we had built together. Then I smiled. Our wedding. He laughed softly. "The one where half your family disappeared?" "Exactly that one." He raised an eyebrow. "That's an interesting anniversary memory." "Maybe." I reached for his hand, but it gave me something important. "What?" I thought for a moment. Then I answered honestly. "Perspective." Because in the end, the greatest gift I received on my wedding day wasn't an inheritance. It wasn't justice. It wasn't even vindication. It was clarity. The empty seats showed me exactly who people were. And once I knew the truth, I stopped chasing approval from those unwilling to give it. Sometimes losing expectations is the beginning of freedom. And sometimes the best wedding gift isn't who shows up. It's discovering who doesn't.